No, I just want to make sure I get your intro nice and clear on the sound.
Good evening, everybody. We're going to start promptly tonight because Mo's told me that he has a great deal to say, and also this is being broadcast live to what is it, all of Iraq?
Facebook.
Oh no, Facebook.
The world.
To the world. So we've got to watch ourselves. Well, welcome to everybody, people who've been before and new people, to Leicester Secular Society, the oldest secular society in the world.
Some of the oldest members as well.
Yes. I paused so that we would have that joke too. If you have a phone, can you turn it off, because we don't want it ringing all over the world when we start talking. If there's a fire, we go out of that door at the back, or use the new fire escape, which it's a bit of a waste of money really, because we've never used it. But there it is. There it is. And toilets are through the door to the right, or up the stairs, or down the stairs. I think we've got one. I know. We've got one announcement. Do you want to say your first?
Yes, just to bring you all up to date on the new Spanish Civil War memorial that's going in Leicester, because the Society made a very good contribution to the stone, mainly because one of the three men that died from Leicester was Roy Watts, who was a member of this society. The stone will be unveiled on March the 30th, which is Good Friday, in Leicester Marketplace. And we'd like to see the banner there. We'll contact the committee about that, and hopefully the President. Thank you.
Are there any other pressing announcements? Gillian, you're...
Yes, I don't know how many people would have known her, but Michelle Goodchild's mother, who wasn't a member, but she did come here fairly regularly, Mandy, she died a couple of weeks ago, so just if there is anybody who knew them well enough to want to go to the funeral, just speak to me later.
Okay. All right. Okay. Right. Well, I'm glad to see you've all put your best clothes on tonight, because tonight we have the president of the society, Mr. Mohammed Abbas, consultant psychiatrist, etc., etc. I asked him what he wanted me to say about him, and he said, just say I'm a nice chap, which I think is true. and he is a very nice chap, and I'm very pleased and indeed quite honoured to introduce him. He's going to talk for almost an hour, and then that will be reduced time for questions. So when you're thinking up long, complicated questions, just forget it. We want short, pithy questions, because we won't have a lot of time. All right, Mohammed.
Many thanks, Hamish. I'll try my best to stick to the nice guy introduction. It is a long talk. I might, in fact, leave some of the slides so that I'll give the good time for Q&A. I just want to double check. People can hear me. Michael, can you hear me well? Yes. Good. Okay. Yes, I am a psychiatrist. I'm not a psychologist. I'm not an anthropologist, and I'm not a sociologist. The reason why I am giving this talk and the reason why I am interested in this area is, as you can see here, I published a couple of papers on schizophrenia, but we approached it from an evolutionary perspective. And that perspective was very relevant to the talk I'm giving today, which is about in-group, out-group relationships. So that's one reason why I'm interested in this area. So it's an academic reason. The other reason has to do with my background. I'm from Iraq. I gave this a similar version of this, a slightly different version of this talk in Baghdad. This was, I think, a year ago in what is nowadays like Baghdad Speakers Corner, like the Speakers Corners in the UK, where people can go and give talks. And the guy sitting beside me is Dr. Maytham Al-Hulu, who came here, in fact, and gave a talk. And in a few weeks' time, we're going to have a joint live event with the Daring Rationalist Group in Baghdad and Leicester Secular Society. And I encourage you all to attend that event. I think it is the 8th of February. Now, I'll try to start with a very, very brief context to make it to try to reduce some of the misunderstanding that people might have, which did happen, in fact, when I gave the talk in Iraq, and people assumed that I was suggesting that the traits we're going to talk are purely genetic. So I'll give that context to help reduce that chance. And then I'll talk about a very important concept, which is the social categorization concept that the human mind use, and the way it is linked to the topic, which is the in-group, out-group dynamics. And we'll talk about why we like members of our groups, why we have bias against members of other groups. I'll talk about a number of psychological mechanisms that maintains this intergroup bias, and then I'll talk briefly about possible approaches to reduce that. So let's start with a very brief context. Now, people used to, and some people still, in fact, keep asking this question: is it nature? Is it nurture? Now, people who are familiar with literature, or before that, let me just quote a couple of papers to give you to set the scene for what I believe is the status. So this paper was published in 2016, where they reported about findings that were replicated, the top 10 findings in behavioral genetics that they were replicated. So we'll talk about finding number one. And finding number one says that all psychological traits shows significant genetic influence. So that's fact number one. Or finding number one in that paper. The second one is no traits are 100% genetic. Now, if you combine both, you will end up with a conclusion that it is not nature only, it is not nurture only, it is both nature and nurture. And there are books like this, one of the top 10 bestsellers, where they talk about nature via nurture. Now, if you step back from that to look at populations and species, then we all, I hope that we all agree that we are the product of a very, very slow and long, very slow process, which we call genetic evolution. the traits that help in survival and reproduction are selected for, and in that way the genes that encode for these traits are selected for. But at the same time, there is more and more literature on cultural evolution, which gives really this story makes it more interesting, really fascinating, that we not only have a genetic evolution, we have cultural evolution, and that the cultural evolution is in fact much quicker, faster. And I would argue as well, it is more amenable for manipulation, because when we're talking about culture, we're talking about accumulated knowledge, norms, rituals, etc. And these can be manipulated. Now, cultural evolution has a very dialectical relationship with with the genetic evolution. Now, so let's talk about the evolutionary context for the evolution of the human brain or the human mind. Now, 99% of our existence on Earth was in as a species was in hunter-gatherer settings. 99%. Now, this is a paper which was published last year, and I'm quoting this. Now, evolution by natural selection is a gradual process. Therefore, we are living with, or we are inheriting a brain which evolved to deal with the social settings of hunter-gatherers. And that's a major fact. Now, therefore, we need to examine what sort of social setting in hunter-gatherer societies. In a hunter-gatherer setting, we know that usually hunters are men, gatherers women, and that people used to live in small groups, defined by kinship. The average size of a group is 150, and I'll come back to this number very quickly. And that there is a clear demarcation between in-groups and out-group members, and that out-group members were usually a source of danger. Now, so our brain evolved in such setting because we're saying we lived in a hunter-gatherer setting for 99% of our story. So we come nowadays to life with a brain which is genetically programmed to deal with such setting. Now, the Dunbar is a well-known anthropologist and evolutionary psychologist who, in fact, done a lot of work on this number and the 150, and that's why it is called Dunbar number. And in fact, he did a lot of research which shows that, in fact, this is the number that you usually find nowadays in many settings, and here are examples. I'm not going to talk about the relationship to the neocortex because of time. Now, so 99% we lived in that setting. Our groups were usually defined by kinship, but then we moved gradually to a setting like now modern cities. And you will find this concept of fictive kinship, where the forms of social ties moved from ties based on blood and marriage only to other forms of ties. And one of the possibly most common one is religion. So you start to define your membership to a group not only based on blood, but on other things. Therefore, in fact, you will find, in fact, in many of these groups, you will find terminologies which, in fact, refer to kinship. So, for example, in religion, you will find people talking about brother, sister, father, etc. Right. I will end that context by saying that the brain is not a blank slate. We come with information processing module. David Buss call it the if-then. So if you have this situation, let's say out of group member, then the tendency is to think this is a danger, could be a source of danger. So we are born with a number of these psychological mechanisms, which nicely, they're not rigid, they are flexible, and they govern our behavior or the output. Right, now, so this is a picture of a desktop. What will be your first impression when you see this picture? Not tidy. See this one. And what's the difference?
I know retention.
This is an illustration of a very important principle that the human brain uses, which is categorization. We cannot live really without categorization, because processing of information will be impossible without categorization. Therefore, we tend to categorize objects in life, including people. So, we usually tend to think of people as members of a groups. Now, quick test. Now, you see here two pictures. Let's call this one picture 1, this one picture 2. You will see why I'm asking you. You will see why I'm asking you this question in a minute. So, I want people who likes 81 to raise their hands, please. Okay, we'll call you group 1. Now, people, I would assume that the rest like this one. Some people might say, I don't like each, however. So I would assume that the rest of people like, okay? So group 1, group 2. Keep it for a minute. Now, so we've said, categorization is a principle that the human brain uses to deal with the enormous task of dealing with life, including categorizing the social environment. And it is important for self-reference. So you can put yourself in a context, and it helps you to understand the social environment and help you to guide your actions. Now, it is well known that one of the basic human needs is the needs of belonging. And that your identity, your self-identity, part of your self-image or self-identity is what we call the social identity, which is that part that is derived from being part of a group. And in that way, we move from talking about me and you to us and them. Now, us, we will call it in a group, then we will call it out of group. I will keep using this slide to build a model step by step. Okay. Now, so what? Being a member of a group, okay, give you a sense of identity, but what else? So we'll talk now about the consequences of that categorization and the consequences of being a member of a group and the consequences of identifying other people as members of the outer group. Back to our. So group 1, group 2. Let us assume that you are here for the first time in this hall, that you don't know each other. So there were no prejudices, etc. Let's just assume that. So the question is, in reward allocation, do you think that you would treat members of the other group differently? Let's say group number 1, let's say we have some rewards, money, and we'll give it to them and we'll tell them to distribute them within this room. Do you think you will treat both groups the same or differently? Group 1, what would you think? Same. Why?
I don't care if the difference is just one I've tasted or not.
Excellent. So this is just an arbitrary way of defining people, and it is maybe not relevant. Okay. Now, in fact, these two paintings were used in research, the same paintings, in a paradigm called the minimal group paradigm, where in fact a group made on such arbitrary basis, like I like this painting, I like this painting, and in fact sometimes just by the toss of a coin. Now, what did they find? In fact, they found even in such arbitrary situation, people treated what they thought their in group, they treated them favorably. And interestingly, that discrimination seems to contribute to a positive social identity. And that people who discriminated more were more identified with their group, and people who either before the act of discrimination or after, interestingly, as if these groups mean something, when possibly we say, well, it doesn't make sense really, so what? Right. Now, other consequences of social categorization or that differentiation between in-group out-group is what we call group homogeneity, which usually occur for out-group. People usually tend to think of out-group members as a homogeneous group, and they are all the same, and tend really to a lesser extent to think of any group members as varied. Categorization exaggerates the differences between any group and out-group members, and it contributes to what we call the ultimate attribution error. Now, the ultimate attribution error is this. If somebody from the out-group member did something wrong, you will attribute it to that because that person was not good. If you do the same thing, or a member of your inner group did the same thing, people usually will think, well, the circumstances, the setting, not because he or she was bad. That's called the ultimate attribution error. Therefore, it seems that people favor inner group members in different ways, in reward allocation, in attitudes, empathy, blah, blah, blah. Right. So, again, trying to build the model, so it seems that we treat people of our group more favorably, and there is a degree of discrimination when we treat members of the outer group. Till now, we talked about reward application or the positive things. Now, let me ask you this question now. If in terms of negative outcomes allocation, and by that I mean, let's say, we'll take a simple example. Let's say if we ask a group 1 to create noise to irritate people, would they irritate people of their group less than people on the other group? What do you think?
Yes.
In fact, interestingly, in terms of negative outcomes allocation, there is still a discrimination, but to a lesser degree. And that is what is called in this area, they call it the positive-negative asymmetry. And one of the explanations suggested are the normative reason. People will start questioning in these paradigms, in this research, people will start questioning, well, why I will treat them badly. In terms of, in fact, the discrimination by distributing rewards or money, fine. But when it comes to, okay, treat them harshly or whatever, it seems people pay more attention to the reasons, or they start to question, is that okay? However, there is still discrimination. Okay. Now, so how do we go from that in-group favoritism to the out-group of prejudice or hate or violence? Here you have the another variable or dimension refer to, which described by the realistic complex theory. And it's simple, really very simple, is that when there is competition between a group over resources, power, incompatible goal, now you can easily go to prejudice and discrimination. And that there are a number of factors that facilitate that out-group hate or prejudice. We talked about the conflicting interest. Now there is a reference to that the more complex the society, the lesser the chance of developing that prejudice, and that a hierarchical, simple hierarchical society will be more prone to do that. Now I'm not sure nowadays with what's happening in the world. If you believe in an ideology which assumes that you are morally superior to people in the other group, then that make it easier for you. It will make it easier for you to show prejudice. And when there are superordinate goals, if there are big goals, but in the absence of a strong identity, and I think that argument, in fact, possibly played in Brexit. I think part of it is that although there are some goals, people you can possibly negotiate with some people that there are some good goals by being part of the European Union, but the European identity is not stronger enough so that you can say, okay, I'm happy to go for these goals, losing my possible British identity. I don't know, that's my thinking, possibly. Okay, now, how these dynamics are maintained? I'm going to talk about a few areas like stereotype, the role of language, conformity, culture, and religion, and I will try quickly to cover them. Now, stereotype. We know, in fact, that the human brain has the tendency to store images about certain group of people to make it easier to deal. And this picture is an illustration. Now, stereotypes have both an implicit aspect, which is the subconscious, automatic, and happen quickly, and it is difficult to change, and has been shown, in fact, with lots of trials that these are there, and people, in fact, tend to reach quick, automatic conclusions about other people's, other group members. But there is as well an explicit part of the stereotypes that are conscious and people can, in fact, change. Now, we know that stereotype augment the negative perception of outer group members and maintain the division. Now, there is a model called the impression formation continuum. And simply suggests that when we make impressions about people, we have this continuum, so our impression is either individuated or stereotypical. And that we are more prone to make individuated impressions if we pay more attention. If we pay more attention to that person, to the situation, or if there is an interdependence, we rely on each other. But people are more prone to make stereotypical impression when they are in a powerful situation, when there's a hierarchy of power. Now, you might be thinking now of somebody who's very stable and a genius, and who thinks that all Mexican immigrants are rapists. So that I think is a perfect illustration of this concept, in fact. Trump. People in power, they don't have time, they're busy, and they don't care. Why do I have to pay more attention so that I reach an impression which is fair about that individual? Now, language again, play a role in maintaining in-group, out-group bias. In fact, you could argue that stereotypes are encoded in language before they are encoded in memory or in behavior, in fact. Let's give an example. Now, see, if you say she was raped versus he raped her, just that different way of saying the same thing can lead to different impressions about responsibility, etc. Another example is the linguistic category model. I mean, I have some colleagues who are English teachers, expert in English, so I have to be very careful. But what we know is that there are different levels of abstraction in terms of the use of language. Say adjective is the one where is the highest going to the lowest. Now, what research shows that there is in fact a linguistic intergroup bias. So for example, an out-group member, a member of another group who did something wrong, you will describe that behavior with an adjective. He's aggressive. When a similar person from your group maybe did the same, when a person from your in-group did the same thing, you will say, he pushed him, rather than using the adjective which gives the impression that this is a stable personality trait. Conformity is another psychological mechanism which can maintain the stereotypes and as well as obviously the inner-group, out-group bias. Now, and conformity, that's a simple definition where we change belief or behavior only to fit in a group. Now, conformity is a normal because, in fact, the cost of not conforming could be huge to the person as well as, in fact, to the society. And it seems, in fact, that, and in fact, if you read about examples of genocide, etc., I have seen that a number of times you will find reference to that, in fact, small minorities started and people followed. And that seems to be the case. And that could be, in fact, you can think of it in a very sad way, but you can think of it as well in a positive way. So if only a single expression of a prejudice can reinforce prejudice, one could argue that a single expression of dissent can have the same impact. The other reason why you think that this could be a good thing is because if you change the norms, and here I will refer you back to what I was talking about when I was talking about that cultural evolution is fast. If you change the norm that this is wrong, then you will help in introducing a different type of conformity, a positive one. So, up until now we've talked about the need for us to categorize people into groups, and that this categorization used to be on the basis of kinship. Later, it moved to be based on many other things, including, in fact, arbitrary. In fact, if you go to Iraq, you will find two bigger groups: the group who support Real Madrid, the group who support Barcelona, and they have their own identity markers, etc. And we've said that you treat members of your in-group favorably, and that there will be a level of discrimination towards out-group members, and that these are maintained usually by stereotypes, conformity, and language. Now, I'll talk about another two variables which maintain this sort of relationship. One, culture. I'll talk about very quickly. There is some suggestion and evidence that in a collectivist culture, that there is a stronger sense of us versus them than in an individualistic culture, and that people from that type of culture are more likely to end up with the ultimate attribution error. there is also this interesting concept of cultural distance, and that the more different the languages, the norms, the rituals between two groups of people, the wider that distance, and it can, in fact, lead to conflict if there is a frequent contact, but at the same time a belief of dissimilarity. Now, the role of religion. Albert, or before Albert, in fact, let's just talk about David Wilson. I'm very much interested in the work of Wilson, and this, in fact, this quotation is very recent. I think only a few weeks ago, when he said this: "There is nothing that you can say about religion that you cannot say about other kinds of groups." And there is a lot of research and literature suggesting, in fact, that the social function of religion is a very significant, if not a primary one. In terms of the social identity, it helps people to cooperate, it helps in dealing with people who are lying or etc., stealing, and in contributing to a fair exchange, as Atran said that in a paper in 2010. Now, Albert, who is a very famous name in the literature of prejudice, did in fact some studies, and he found that those who reported that religion was had an important influence on their upbringing, they tend to show higher prejudice, interestingly. And in fact, subsequent studies confirm that. Now, these were done in churchgoers. Then there was a more elaboration on what do we mean by religion, and in fact Albert gave a two-dimensional model where there is the extrinsic religion, where the person used religion as a means to an end, versus the intrinsic religion, where the religion is just an end in itself, giving the person a sense of meaning in life. And he found that, in fact, extrinsic religion is the one which is associated more with the prejudice. Now, there is another model where I talk about a three-dimension. So the first two dimensions are very similar to the previous two, but add to this dimension, which I find it interesting, where religion is a quest. And that the individual approach religious issues, religious concept, accepting their complexity, refusing rigid answers, etc. And in fact, I could think of a couple of friends, Muslim friends, who you could argue that their approach to religion is just like that. And you can see how enriching, in fact, to them, and how humane they are in their dealing with other people. So in that model, only that dimension that showed low prejudice. Interesting. Okay. So the problem. Good. I think I'm doing well with time.
You can make your questions a bit longer.
Yeah. Right. So the problem in summary, we need categorization, including social categorization, that lead, in fact, whether you like it or not, to the identifying yourself as a part of a group. We call it the inner group, and that the others are part of the outer group, and the factor that lead to that distinction could be blood, race, ethnicity, religion, profession, blah, blah, blah. We talked about inner group favoritism, outer group bias, maintained by stereotypes, conformity to religion, and that there is an environment. So when there is competition, then that could lead to prejudice and could lead even to violence, and that the role of culture, history, in fact, as we said, resources can shape the relationships in one way or another. Okay, and outer group fear seems to be a powerful tool. In fact, it is a very powerful tool. I do believe it was the main factor that led to the election of Trump, in my view. And I think it has as well contributed to the Brexit. Yes, there are other factors, of course, but I think the message or the approach led to activating these very powerful human emotions and fears. Now, are there solutions? Now, the solutions are usually two types of approaches to reduce the prejudice and the out-group bias. One is let them meet, what's called intergroup contact, which we'll talk about in a minute. Or you have a different type of approaches which are based on addressing the categories, the variable which led to the distinction of the groups. So, and here we have a few models which I will talk about. So intergroup contact assumes that the hostility, the stereotypes, the bias is fueled by the unfamiliarity, by the separation. And that if we bring people together in the right condition, then you could reduce these biases, stereotypes. And Albert talks about 4 conditions. In fact, later research confirmed that these conditions are necessary to promote a healthy intergroup contact, including that this contact is supported by some sort of an authority which fosters certain norms, that the contact has an intimate aspect, personal aspect, and that the 2 parties believe that they have an equal status, and that there is a cooperative interdependence. In fact, there are some or what's called the common in-group identity. And in that way, the 2 or more groups